Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. Today, just before the weekend, we've got some massive news for you, right? Apparently there's billions and billions of pounds in green subsidies that are being given by the government to various different companies. But Rachel Reeves didn't mention it in her budget. Isn't that strange? We'll also be rounding up some of the stories about Christmas. There's been a big brawl at Winter Wonderland. And of course, we've got an amazing story, a tale to tell about a raccoon who somehow broke into a liquor store in America and got completely and utterly drunk on all of the stuff that was in there. A great story, absolutely incredible. Also, I'm going to be telling you about how much money is being collected every single day by ULEZ charges, by congestion charges, and incredible charges on top of all of that for car drivers driving around London. Plus, we're going to be saying, what is going on with our trains and why do they have to keep telling us what they want us to hear? We'll bring you all that, plus loads more at the home of common sense. Let's get it on. So it's been one heck of a week for Rachel Reeves, hasn't it? We've been talking about her every single day, and today will be no different, because Rachel Reeves is still the woman who is at the centre of the biggest controversy that this country has ever seen when it comes to the management of the country's finances. Because the UK, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to tell you, is broke. It's not as broke as she said it was before the budget, and it's not as broke as it's been in the past, like in the 1970s when they had to go cap in hand to the IMF and try and borrow enough money to keep the place afloat. But rest assured, we are not in a very good place. And it turns out that just last night, there was another revelation about the budget. The budget, of course, which was leaked before it was supposed to have been by the Office for Budget Responsibility, or the Office for Budget Irresponsibility, as we now know. We know that the man in charge of that has now resigned. Mr. Hughes, gone. Richard Hughes, was it? Completely gone for a Burton. And lots of people think that he's been the sacrificial lamb and that now, supposedly, nobody will investigate what really actually happened and whether Rachel Reeves did something which might have been construed as actually criminal. Because to give away confidential and private and sensitive financial information to a market before the actual announcement is made could be construed as a hostile act. It could be construed as something which was incredibly disproportionate and which could be construed as something that would make people make decisions and change their minds about the way that they were going to handle their money in the future. And some people might have even made a large fortune out of it. So that question still remains. But here's what we've discovered. In addition to all of that, in addition to the fact that, Kemi Badenoch during Prime Minister's questions actually called Rachel Reeves a fake. She said the budget was fake. She said she's a fake. And even her claims that she was a chess champion are also fake. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a more personal attack made on any Chancellor of the Exchequer. And also, by the way, we haven't mentioned this week yet, but Rachel Reeves is now less trustworthy, as seen by the British people, than Liz Truss, than Kwasi Kwarteng, and than any other previous Chancellor has ever been, right? So there is no confidence in this woman, and yet she clings to the job and still, apparently, is going to get up in the morning and claim her Chancellor's salary and her MP's salary and her expenses. But how about this, right? It turns out that she excluded billions and billions of pounds out of the budget in wind and solar subsidies. This was a story that was broken just a few hours ago by the Daily Telegraph, right? This has been revealed as well by the Office for Budget Responsibility. They revealed in their latest economic assessment that £1 billion a year will be added to household energy bills to fund Ed Miliband's next auction for renewables. Now, hang on a minute. Wasn't one of the main planks of their policy and of the budget that we were going to get £150 off our electricity bill? Because it was one of the things that when Rachel Reeves was talking at the weekend and trying to sort of say how great the budget was, they were championing. Keir Starmer himself, when he said he was terribly proud of the budget because it lifted 500,000 children out of poverty, said that one of the great pluses of the budget was that we're all going to get £150 of a rebate or a subsidy to pay for our electricity. Well, it turns out that that was also complete and utter nonsense. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get pretty sick and tired of being lied to by this government, right? This new scheme apparently is called Allocation Round 7, because Ed Miliband, for short, calls it AR7. This is all about handing out subsidies to companies for collecting electricity through solar power and wind power, okay? This all came out because it was a footnote to the OBR's Fiscal Outlook report, which is basically supposed to highlight costs relating to contracts for difference, right? Levies are basically added to household bills to finance subsidies for green energy projects, including wind, solar, and nuclear. I mean, how do they get away with this stuff, right? The OBR forecast says the costs are set to rise from 2.3 billion in 24-25 to 4.6 billion by 2030 to 31. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want a heat pump in my house. Apparently, they're really noisy. Apparently, they're really useless. They heat the water not to a very high degree, so that you're risking all sorts of terrible things happening to you if you get into it or if you swallow it, because it's not hot enough to be safe, right? And apparently, if you have a heat pump in a house, it doesn't even heat the house properly. It's absolutely ridiculous. So why are we having to put up with all of these ridiculous green energy policies? You know as well as I do that your electricity bill has probably been rising by the month since the beginning of January, right? You're probably paying maybe a third more than you were paying back in January of this year. There's something very wrong at the heart of this government, right? Aside from the fact that they're clearly all telling lies all the bloody time, it also seems as though they will not ever tell us the truth about where the energy is coming from, how much money we're subsidising it to the tune of, and why we are having to do it in the first place. Nobody wanted green energy. And isn't it strange that the party that's kind of coming up hot on the heels of Labour, the Green Party, led by that rather strange man, Zach Polanski, who, remember, used to think that he could hypnotise women into making their breasts bigger. You know, that's what he used to do, regardless of how he now explains it. Oh, yeah, I just did it for an article in the newspaper. Oh, really? They never talk about green energy. You never hear Zach Polanski talking about anything other than soaking the rich. All you ever hear from him is how he wants to collect more money from rich people in taxes, how he wants to limit the amount of money that rich people can make, how he wants to limit the number of houses that people can buy, how he wants to limit the number of people that you can employ. You know, this guy is a Marxist, absolutely no question. But what he's not is a green energy aficionado. I don't think I've ever heard Zach Polanski talk about how he would like to make the energy infrastructure change in this country. It's all a bit weird, isn't it? But all I can tell you is that once again, as we reach the end of yet another week in Rachel Thieves' world, Richard III is still going to bed at night knowing full well that she's just told another absolute pack of lies to hang on for grim death to her job. It's a disgrace. And as Richard III would say, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. It's time to talk about cars, right? We know from the Chancellor's budget that they're going to be punishing us once again for driving, because driving is bad, isn't it? They want you all to use public transport while all at the same time being driven around in prime ministerial and ministerial cars, which you get given for free, right? Rachel Reeves has her own Range Rover. She gets driven around in it. Sadiq Khan has his own Range Rover. He gets driven around in it. He even gets to put his dogs in it when he wants to take them for a walk, right? But for those of us who don't have a car supplied to us without any kind of payment necessary, because quite frankly, if the HMRC people were involved and somebody gave you a car to drive you around in, you'd have to pay some kind of tax on it. I bet they don't, right? What they're trying to do all the time is punish us drivers. You know, they're coming up with more and more amazing reasons to fine us, to tax us, you know. It's just absolutely incredible, right? So let me ask you this. When was the last time you paid a fine for a car that you were involved in driving, right? Because you can now get fined for putting your left wheel into a bus lane while you go round an ambulance which is turning right. You can get fined for putting, you know, a tiny, tiny inch of one of your tyres into a yellow box, which you're not supposed to be in. You can also, of course, be done for going through a red light as it's going red. You can get a speeding fine for going 26 in a 20. I mean, so many parts of Britain now have got 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, which is ludicrous. You can get fined for overstaying your car park, even though you're paying millions and millions and millions of pounds just to park for 15 minutes, certainly in central London. Well, here's a couple of statistics for you, right? Do you know that ULEZ, which is the sort of emissions zone fine that you pay, or you know, allowance that you pay, £545,000 per day is what they collect from the ULEZ in London alone. That's £12.50 a day. And there's another estimated £180,000 per day from penalty charge notices for non-payment. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. The Dartford crossing, which is something that a lot of people use, it's on the M25, which goes around London. It's like the London Orbital motorway. If you go through the Dartford crossing, you're supposed to pay a toll. There's a tunnel going north. There's a big bridge coming south. It's the one that those bozos from Just Stop Oil climbed up. Do you remember those characters that ended up going to prison because they were sitting in the stanchions of the bridge? I don't use it very much, and so what I did a couple of years ago was I thought, just in case I occasionally forget to pay it, I'm not going to give them an automatic payment scenario. But what I can do is open an account and put some money in it, which is what I did. I put about 30 quid in it because I think it's less than 5 quid every time you go. So I thought, just on the off chance that I forget to pay it, because you can't pay it while you're driving, obviously, because you're not allowed to, for one thing, because now if you start using your phone while you're driving, that's another fine, because they've now got these huge cameras everywhere. So I thought, no problem, I'll just put some money in the account, and then whenever I don't remember that I've driven over it or under it, they'll just take the money. So earlier this year, I was coming back from Sussex on a Sunday night, and because of the congestion in most of central London, the sat-nav said to me, the best way to go is over the Dartford crossing and then turn left on the A13 and come into London. Fine, I know this is all a bit local, but bear with me. So I do that, and of course I get home and I completely forget to even think about paying for the Dartford crossing, but I'm not worried about it because they've already got my money, right? About a month later, I get a fine. And the fine is for something like £180. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, why have I got a fine when they've got my money? So I rang them up and I said, look, I'm sorry, but I think you've actually got money in an account which you should have taken in order to, receive the payment. That's why I put the money in there. And do you know what they said? They said, oh yeah, well, we've had to close the account. And I went, why? And they said, well, because you haven't used it for over a year. And I'm like, so? And they said, well, sometimes that usually means that, you've sold the car or you've given the car to somebody else, you don't have the car anymore, so we automatically close the account. I said, well, that's ridiculous. I said, I'm not paying a fine that you should have taken out of my own account. So they were quite nice and they agreed. The woman was very kind. She said, look, I agree. I'll take the money out of the... she said, I can't take the money out of the account because it's closed. You'll have to give me the £4.50 or whatever it is. So I had to give them a separate card number so they could take the £4.50. And I said, well, can I have my money back, please? And she said, well, you have to ring customer services in order to do that. And I was just like, oh. And I still haven't done it because I haven't got time. I just can't be bothered. But so they basically probably got millions and millions of pounds sitting in their own account because people just haven't bothered, or they've forgotten, or they've died, and they haven't taken the money back out. It's absolutely extraordinary. Incredible. Anyway, the reason we're talking about this is because I spotted a story this week in which drop-off charges were highlighted because, this is another racket. When you take your daughter, as I do quite often, to the airport, I took my daughter to the airport in July, actually, funnily enough, down to Gatwick. And as you drive there, you say to yourself, don't forget to pay it. And of course, by the time you get home, you've forgotten to pay it. And so what was a sort of £3 charge suddenly turns into a £50 charge or £200 charge if you don't pay it quickly enough. And so Heathrow have decided to throw another sort of ball into the pond because they've now said that the drop-off charge is going up to £7, which means that even if you're just dropping your child, your father, your mother, your cousin, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, you're dropping them off for 2 minutes, because that was how long I was at Gatwick last time, it's going to cost you £7. I mean, is there any way in the world that you can justify that kind of money? £7 just to stop your car, to let somebody get out and basically take their bag out of the back. It's ridiculous. It's a rip-off. It's disgusting. It shouldn't be allowed. Meanwhile, there's another car story I want to share with you, and this is the one about Zipcar. Zipcar is a company that was owned by Avis, the rental car company, and in London, basically you could drive a Zipcar by the hour. So you could, if you were fortunate enough to have one parked in your street, you could sign up and you could use a credit card to get into the car, and it was something like £10 an hour. And you could drive it around to your heart's content. You'd have to pay congestion charge, you'd have to pay petrol and all that, but it was still better than owning a car. Well, Zipcar have declared that because of the ridiculous amount of money that it now costs to drive in London, £15 for the congestion charge, £12.50 for the ULEZ, that's £27.50. That's before you've been fined for doing anything, before you've actually parked anywhere, before you put any petrol in the bleeding thing, And they've just said, look, we're going to shut our operations down. We've already closed our operation in Oxford, in Cambridge, in Bristol. They said that they were going to concentrate on their market in London, but even their market in London now is unsustainable. They can't make any money because it's just too expensive. Sadiq Khan has killed off the car business in London. I mean, you'd be amazed if you drove around London, as I do quite a lot, because it's actually more congested than ever. You know why? There's about 60,000 Uber drivers that didn't used to be there. There's loads and loads of Amazon delivery men and all sorts of other DPD delivery men and every whatever it is. There's so many people ordering stuff online. It hasn't occurred to anybody that you might be clogging up the city. Well, you are. So the whole situation is an absolute nightmare. But ordinary drivers are being punished and being, absolutely and utterly devastated by the cost of owning a car. And that's before you paid insurance. That's before you put any petrol in it. It's an absolute nightmare. It's a nightmare. If you drive a car, you've got to be insane. Welcome back. Now's the time to read out some of your messages. You've been so prolific on YouTube, on Facebook, and indeed on Twitter as well. So I'm just going to read out some of your messages because they're so exciting and really, really encouraging, right? So good to have Mike back again, says Antonio. Nigel says, Mike, you are the voice of common sense, so great to have you back. On the subject of the striking doctors who are going out, of course, at Christmas, they are not doctors, they are political activists, says the winds of change. And on the subject of abolishing juries on David Lammy's front, we didn't vote for abolishing juries, 800 years of a fair judicial system, and then we have Lammy tearing it up. Absolutely ridiculous. And here's one from... who is it? Mr. T. Well done as usual, Mike. Played this inside my local supermarket and shoppers were asking, who's that? You now have at least 6 new listeners and subscribers. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Glad to hear your voice in the morning again, Mike, says Tanya. And Emily says, David Lammy is a total waste of space. All he wants to do is to wreck our country and its history and traditions as quickly as possible. Just a word to the wise. I've got one here. I don't know if it's in code. From Richard in Leicester. Who says, why have they built a car park on top of me? What does he mean? Who is Richard in Leicester? Comparison my horse. Is that the way? No, that was Henry V, I think, wasn't it? Don't ask David Lammy who comes before Henry V, because he'll probably say Henry VIII, obviously, won't he? On Twitter, I've got this from James. Literally cannot wait for the full unedited new media platform to rise. Mike is a absolutely cracking character. Us old farts do struggle with technology, but it's going to be well worth the wait. Of that, I'm in no doubt. And here's one from, where are we? English, who says, I've watched every show so far. You are now free of the draconian Ofcom rules and free to speak your mind. Keep up the brilliant work, mate. Thank you very much indeed. Here's one from, where are we? I'm not surprised with your figures increase. The Facebook MG show support group has increased 4-fold in a week. You're a popular guy in demand, says Benjamin. I didn't even know that. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoying the serious format of your morning show without the insufferable commercial breaks. Well done, says Sue. Also, I like the new hairdo. Let's see. You couldn't make it up about David Lammy, says Richard. He makes Frank Spencer look intelligent. Betty, I know. Good to see you back on air, Mike. Hope you go from strength to strength, says Susan. That's nice. And Clive says, Mike Graham, back. What a legend. Makes me sick, though, that Labour are giving train drivers a big pay rise, junior doctors great big pay rises. Everybody else is struggling to live. I know. Absolutely right. I fully agree with you regarding David Lammy, says Val, wanting to do away with jury trials. He's not equipped to make such important decisions. He needs to be quiet until he can stand down, which I hope he will very soon. We need proper politicians who have experience of Parliament and are not foreign nationals. Well, here's the problem. Most of the people in Parliament are not foreign nationals, but they're not very good. It's got nothing to do with whether they're foreign or not. It's got everything to do with whether they're any good or not. And quite frankly, none of them are. There's hardly, you can probably count on one hand all of the MPs who are actually decent, can't you? We'll see you soon. So Christmas is just around the corner, right? Literally just a couple of weeks away, maybe 3. Christmas party season, the office party, the thing that used to be one of the great joys of working in a company rather than working from home. But of course, so many people now still do work from home. And so many people are snowflakes. I was talking to My son the other day, he was working in London for the first time, and he said to me, "Oh yeah, there was a guy who was working with me, a little bit older than him, and he said he came down about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, and he was from the north of England, and seemed to get on quite well. He was staying in a hotel. His parents were obviously sort of helping him out with a bit of money while he was sort of finding his way in the world. And my son said he came into work the other day, and the guy wasn't there. And he said to somebody, he said, 'Where's so-and-so?' I'm not going to mention any names, pack drill, all of that. It's all confidential. Apparently he went home because he was homesick. Didn't like living in London. Wanted to go back to his parents' house. And you just think, for God's sake, I mean, can you imagine if these people had been around in the 80s or the 90s, or even the beginning of this century, the noughties, where Christmas parties were literally the highlight of the year? Somebody would cop off with somebody else would snog somebody else. Mostly it was completely and utterly harmless. People would turn up the next morning with their sort of heads in their hands because they'd been out until 3 in the morning. They'd ended up in a nightclub or a casino or in bed with somebody that they probably didn't think they'd end up in bed with. Nowadays, they will be wandering about with those great big. Have you seen these great big water things that they carry around? One, they've all got rucksacks, right? But they've also got these giant sort of flasks of water. I mean, you'd literally be able to cross Sahara with one of these things. You've got so much water in it, right? It's gallons of it. And you just think, you see them on the tube. You're going, what are you doing? It's not like, you don't live near a shop where you can just go and buy a bottle of water and drink it. Oh, no. You've got to bring your own water with you. You've got to bring it to the party. You've got to make sure you don't have a drink just in case you might, lose your inhibitions. You're not allowed to talk to anybody that doesn't want you to talk to them. You're not allowed to chat anybody up. You're not allowed to, certainly not allowed to get a little bit tiddly by having one drink too many. And in fact, an awful lot of Christmas parties, I'm told now, in various different companies, don't even have any alcohol. I find it just really odd. They don't know how to enjoy themselves, do they? But of course, then there's the other side of it. And this is what I'm going to bring you from Nottinghamshire Police. They were called to an incident in Old Market Square earlier this week because it's Winter Wonderland time, right? Now, in London, Winter Wonderland means there's a huge sort of capacity venue in Hyde Park, and they take over like most of Hyde Park for it. And you go there and you win cuddly bears and, big candy canes, and you go on bumper car rides and you go through the sort of Hall of Mirrors and all that. It's like a big fun fair, basically. But it's quite expensive. Up in Nottingham, I suspect it's probably not quite as expensive. But of course, because it's Christmas and because people can't quite control themselves, there was a mass brawl. It's so British. A mass brawl between a load of youths. And the police were called. Two teenagers have been arrested as a result. And a lot of people were spitting at the police. I'm sorry, that's not funny, right? So obviously, this is not the funny part. But it comes basically 2 weeks after 4 machete-wielding youths sparked panic within metres of the Winter Wonderland site. Pictures from the scene of the brawl, it says here on Monday, showed a large crowd gathered outside a Starbucks with more than a dozen police officers interspersed between them. I mean, what's wrong with these guys, I mean, there is something in between carrying, your weight in water around with you or, getting completely so screwed up and drunk that you have to end up punching someone, right? A 15-year-old boy was arrested on suspicion of intent to supply Class A drugs. What? A 16-year-old was also detained on suspicion of obstructing a police officer. It's just insane. I don't know what's happened to this country. Video footage shared online appears to show one teenager being detained and led into a marked police car. Another social media footage appears to show a heightened police presence at the event in recent days because of persistence of bad behaviour by these kids, right? What is wrong with them? A spokesman for Nottingham Police said officers arrested 2 suspects after engaging with a group of youths at 5:45 p.m. It's not even late at night. What's happened to Britain? Britain has become this kind of lawless place. The kids don't care. Their parents don't care. They're not worried about what the police will do to them. They're not worried about taking drugs or doing drugs or selling drugs or buying drugs. It's all very strange, isn't it? It's not like Christmas when I was growing up. I remember once on a Christmas evening when I was probably underage, and I should probably not say who supplied me with it, but there was a drink we used to drink called Carlsberg Special Brew. And my present from the guy that I used to work for in the Hungarian bakery was a case of Carlsberg Special Brew. And I remember taking it home and putting it under my bed and drinking it over the course of Christmas. But before that, I ended up going to the local pub in Hampstead where they knew me, and they probably knew I was underage, but they let me drink pints of Special Brew to such an extent that I was so drunk I could barely walk. And my sister, thankfully, helped me to walk home. And as we were walking home, which took about normally 15 minutes, but it was about a mile, my parents actually came past in the car and stopped and picked me up, and they took me home, and I spent the rest of the night throwing up all over the place, which was not a very popular move, I have to say. But it takes me on to the other story that we've got today for you, which is about a drunken raccoon. Rocky Raccoon, you might remember from the Beatles album. Hanover County Animal Protection and Shelter, and this is over in America, in Virginia, confirmed one of its animal control officers, Samantha Martin, was called to a chaotic scene on Saturday morning because a raccoon had somehow managed to get into a liquor store, which in America is like the equivalent of a place that only sells alcohol, right? Staff at the liquor store in Virginia arrived to work on Saturday morning to find bottles smashed amid puddles of scotch and whiskey, and the raccoon, believe it or not, was passed out next to it because the raccoon had apparently somehow smashed all the bottles and drunk all the booze. Upon arrival, it says here, Samantha Martin discovered the suspect had broken in, the suspect being a raccoon, ransacked several shelves and then passed out in the bathroom. A very intoxicated raccoon. What an amazing story. Incredible. And I mean, who knew that raccoons, I mean, normally, if I give my dog, Ziggy, even a smell from the top of a bottle of whiskey, he literally is like, his eyes start watering, he runs off, you know. A very old dog, when I was much younger, when I was still married, we had an old dog called Ben, who was half wolfhound, half Labrador, and he used to quite like beer. We'd take him down to the local pub and they'd have a doggy bowl and you'd put some beer in it, and he used to love that. Dogs do like an occasional drink, but nothing like this raccoon, who's obviously a complete alcoholic. This is graceful, shocking, unbelievable. Merry Christmas.